have her introduce herself, which would be kind of like the first question, and then we will have, as we said, a luncheon and then a workshop afterwards. And after you hear from her today, I think you're going to want to go to the workshop. You may even feel like you need to go to the workshop. I'm not telling you what to do, just making a suggestion, okay? Yeah, I thought you would. Okay. And so, I'm starting to say Archana, that's the way it is, not Archana. Pathak, I got it right. I'm looking at it, I can't say it. Okay. Archana Pathak has her PhD from the University of Oklahoma. And she is a post-colonialist, feminist, scholar, activist. Everybody know what that is? All right, good. Those who do, you're going to find out in a little while. And who examines issues of race and culture and class and gender and sexuality and nationality from a social justice perspective. She is truly an activist, and she has blessed Richmond because of her thoughts, because of her beliefs, because of the fact that she's willing to stand up and speak out and make a difference in our lives here in Richmond. She teaches at VCU, and as a member of the faculty there, was a member of the Faculty of Unity of Richmond. A couple of the courses she teaches is Introduction to Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies, and also Politics of Race, Class, and Gender. She's a great speaker. She is an instructor, and she's also a workshop facilitator. And she does it all with excellence. She does it all with love. You'll hear that. You'll see it. You'll feel it. She does it all because she cares about people. And here's the one. She does it through ethnography. Was that right or close? Ethnography, which she's going to explain to you because I can't say it. She's going to explain to you, okay? But I know what it means because I looked it up. But anyway, more importantly, what I have found from her when I interviewed her and also from this morning is that she is brilliant. And if you read some of her material, you'll find that out. She is articulate, and you'll see that and feel that. But most of all, she's real. And she's a person of courage. And so I want to welcome you, Archana. Come on up and have a seat, please.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning. Okay, so why don't we just start off?
There's a lot of people here.
Yes, there are, okay? It's a little different than 9 o'clock, right?
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, I know.
Here we go.
And sometimes they sneak in after 11 o'clock, and it really is bigger than it looks, okay? So, yeah, yes, you do. But you were here at 9 o'clock, before 9 o'clock this morning, Rob. And that's not normal, that's right, but it's good. So let me ask you to introduce yourself. Explain your journey and why you've chosen the journey that you have. Sure. And anything else you'd like to share about yourself with this group.
Okay, sure. So I always call this the Reader's Digest version of my story. My parents immigrated to the United States from India in 1970 and brought me here a few years after that. And all of my work really centers around a question that has been a driving force in my life. And so my work professionally in the academy, but my work in the community and sort of my own personal spiritual journey really centered around the question about there have to be other people out there like me, right? And partly that was because I am what is called a 1.5er. My parents were first-generation immigrants. They came to the United States as adults and had developed their identity outside of the U.S. My sister is second generation. She was born to immigrants here in the U.S. But I belong to that particular population that's stuck somewhere in between. I was born in India, but brought to the United States before I had gone through full identity development. So anytime before 15, 16 years old when you really kind of know who you are. So I came here when I was quite young. And so because of that, I lived and have lived and continue to straddle multiple worlds all the time. And so I always kept wondering, isn't there anyone else out there who kind of feels like I feel, who has the experiences I have, who has the questions that I have, and maybe the answers that I have? And I have been kind of seeking community around that and finding community around that throughout my life. And that's really what's shaped my work, all the way from the questions I decided to ask when I chose what degree I wanted to study and the kind of research I wanted to do, to understanding who I was from a spiritual perspective, to knowing how I would approach and think about doing the community work that I do.
Thank you. Thank you. And two definitions I'm going to ask you about.
Sure.
Post-colonial feminism.
Okay.
What's that all about?
All right. So let me start by asking, folks in this room have heard the word feminism before, right? Yeah? All right, great. So I'm gonna start with that one, and then explain how I get to the post-colonial part. How many of you have heard the word post-colonial before? And maybe think, all right, great. So feminism, my teacher's teacher, a woman by the name of Sheris Krameray, is best known because she coined the phrase that has often been most quoted when people are asked, what is feminism? And she's the woman who said that feminism is the radical notion that women are people. Right? And so that was sort of my introduction to the idea of feminism. I'd always understood and known and felt a deep sense of justice in me. Even as a young child, I kind of tended to fight for the underdog, wanted to know why everyone didn't have all the same things, and I sensed that, but I didn't have any words for it. But in high school, I started reading and was introduced to the writings of incredible African-American female writers, particularly Toni Morrison. And it was that work, starting with Toni Morrison and then reading people like Audre Lorde and Bell Hooks. And as I started reading those women, I started hearing voices that resonated in my soul in a certain kind of way. And so I started getting introduced to these ideas of feminism. But as I walked into these spaces of feminism, on one hand, it felt really good because I started hearing and thinking about and having people engage in conversations around justice that spoke to a song that was in my heart. But on the other hand, it felt very strange because the ways in which I knew how to be a woman, the cultural practices that felt right in my bones, that kind of oozed out of my skin, were often not accepted in those circles. We're often not understood. We're often not recognized in the ways that I experience them. And so I had a very sort of hard time making sense of this space that was supposed to be just and inclusive, that called to question how I was. And so that confusion led me to start thinking and looking to feminism outside of the United States. And in doing that, I started reading scholars and thinkers and writers and activists that were from other parts of the world. And that's also when I began my journey into looking at what social justice looked like in my historical roots, and learned more about that, and was introduced to post-colonial feminism. And post-colonialism, in a very simple way, I think can be explained as the study and understanding of the experiences of collectives of peoples who have suffered the traumas of colonialism. And so that was such a big part of what shaped my identity. And so I'm the daughter of children of independence, and so my parents were children under British colonial Raj. My grandmother was raised under British colonial Raj, and so that is so much a part of who I am. And so when I started hearing the voices of women who wrote those stories, I was like, okay, here's a feminism that speaks to me. And so that's how I moved into that. And so that kind of tells you what those terms mean.
Thank you. And then the next one, which I will try to pronounce once more, is the idea of autoethnography.
Autoethnography.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Okay.
So how many?
Yeah. What does that mean? Thank you.
So how many of you have heard the word ethnography before? Right. So ethnography is this. It's a method of research. It's a way of doing research, and it basically means the study of peoples, right? And it's utilized in lots of different disciplines. But ethnography has a kind of checkered past, as most things do in our world, but it has a bit of a checkered past. In fact, the first ethnographers were Christian missionaries who went into quote unquote savage lands to learn about the residents of those lands so that they could pave the way for the colonial process to begin, right? So it started off not in not such a glorious sort of way, but it is the study of people, and it's evolved as a method, and it's grown and changed and has a lot of social justice components to it. So if it's the study of people, whenever you put the word auto in front of something, it means self, right? So autoethnography is the study of self. And so what I do is I utilize my own story, right? Like one would write an autobiography. I utilize my own story as a site of analysis. So I engage with my story, I tell my story, but more importantly, I analyze it. I look at how it serves to make sense of who we are as people. So as I said earlier, I'm a 1.5er, right? So as I think about folks who are displaced during identity development, I use my story to think about how does that affect people's psyche? How do they then interact in the world? What does it mean about who they are in terms of their relationship with their home of origin? What does it mean with their newly located home? And so it's kind of utilizing my own story for analysis more than simply just telling my story for the sake of telling it.
Thank you. You have been president, I believe. Are you still president?
No.
Okay, past president of the Board of Conciliation Project. The Conciliation Project, for those who don't know, is a group of students from VCU primarily who perform plays that talk about oppression and talk about bigotry, and they do it beautifully and they do it dynamically. We've had several of them performed here. What has that experience been like for you? What have you learned from it, and what do you hope for it to do, the program itself?
My experience with the Conciliation Project was and continues to be one of the most profound experiences that I've had. It allows, so the Conciliation Project uses dramatic techniques to explore systems of oppression, particularly racism, in order to heal our traumatic legacies. And it speaks to, I think, one of the core issues that really shapes how I do my work in the community, and that is that having conversations about who we are is a deeply personal, intimate, and embodied experience. And so by utilizing theater, it allows for us to be in our bodies and be in our hearts as we move through the conversation, right? Instead of sort of being abstractly in our heads. And the value of that value of having that integrated sensation of being able to connect my heart, my mind, and my body and spirit to this learning and unlearning that is so central to creating a just and inclusive world. And working with the folks of the Conciliation Project, I have never met a group of more committed, passionate, honest, vulnerable peoples. You know, they really embody the vulnerability and heart that it takes to do this work. And so it's been an incredibly profound experience. In my dream world, the Conciliation Project would be doing shows all over the United States all the time. That is my dream.
Good, thank you. You've been doing workshops around Richmond on racism, and you'll be doing one today, of course. Would you just give us, not the workshop, but an overview of some of your thoughts about racism and how you might see it differently than some folks?
Okay. We have been dealing with racism in this country for over 300 years. This is not a new conversation. For some folks, it may feel new, but it is not new at all. Race and racism is an integral part of the fabric of this society, and it is one we have to take time to look at. up until very recently, I think, most of our conversations around oppression in this society have focused on the untenable disgrace of how we treat disenfranchised folk. Right? So when we talk about racism, we have conversations about how horrible it is, the way we treat people of color. When we talk about sexism, we talk about how sad it is that women don't have the same things men do. When we talk about homophobia, we talk about how depressing it is that non-heterosexual folks are not accepted and loved in the way that heterosexual folks are. Well, that's well and good, and that's important. But the truth of the matter is that we cannot engage in the conversation about what is missing without understanding at some level that there are some of us who are enfranchised. There are many of us who actually have power. And until we have that conversation, we are not going to dismantle oppression. And so my work and the workshops that I do particularly focus on understanding privilege and the accountability that we must have with the privilege that we hold, whether it's our race privilege, our class privilege, our ability status, etc. And to understand that systems of oppression are damaging all of us, regardless of where we are in the structure. Right? So it's no longer a conversation about what we're going to do for others, and it becomes very importantly a conversation about what does it mean to look in the mirror and see who we are, and how are we complicit in the systems of oppression that we keep claiming we want to dismantle. So that's my approach. It's way more talking about who we are rather than talking about what everyone else doesn't have.
Thank you. That is a little bit of a different approach. And it's a direct approach, and it's probably a little uncomfortable for folks. Have you found that to be true?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
I thought
it
you
is
might say
uncomfortable.
That. Yeah. So if you want to become uncomfortable today, and sometimes that's our job, to let each other become uncomfortable, and at the same time recognize that we can share things together with love and as love, and we can agree and disagree. And in that process, we grow together. And that's what you're going to experience this afternoon at 1 o'clock when Archana presents her workshop. And it will be up here in the sanctuary at 1 o'clock. Now, I would like to just ask you one other question, and that is, what would you like to share with these folks today?
I think there's two things that really stick out for me. You mentioned the fact that it would be uncomfortable, but I think that there's something incredibly valuable that we are losing as a society, and that is our ability to hold ourselves in discomfort. Discomfort is one of the most important spaces of learning for ourselves as a society. If you remember when you were learning how to ride a bike, right? It was when you didn't have your balance that your body understood what balance meant. And until you were off balance, you didn't quite get what the point was, right? And so allowing yourselves to be off balance, allowing ourselves to be off balance is one of the most important parts of this process. And I will say, I say this in my classes all the time, I never ask people to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. And so there are moments of immense discomfort for me as well, right? And that's and just learning how to be gentle with ourselves in those moments and allowing ourselves to grow. And recognizing, this is the second service for me, and so every time I'm getting more and more, Katrina, the song that you sang, A Holy War, the second verse, and I want you to say the line for me. If we could heal.
What if sex was holy and war was obscene and it was twisted in this beautiful dream?
If we could.
Boundaries. There's so many.
The line about if we could heal ourselves.
If we could heal each other and feel each other, and we can break these walls between each other, blow by blow and brick by brick. Keep yourself open.
And I think, I heard it the first time and it didn't quite register. I heard it the second time. So my workshops are entitled Healing Ourselves, Healing Our World. Until and unless we learn to hold ourselves in the truth of who we are, the histories that shape us, and our willingness to be accountable to those histories. We cannot heal ourselves, and if we are not healed, our world remains unhealed. And so for me, and I hope you join me on this journey, and it's just the first step in a journey that we take for a lifetime, I hope that we can continue the conversation to think about how to look in that mirror and do so with the immense love that we all deserve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One last thing.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned in the first service that
Sure.
you're Hindu.
I am.
Okay. And how does that make a difference in your life? In a few words.
Okay. I feel like every question is like an entire class, but let's work on that. All right. Hinduism is a way of life. It is not merely a religion. It is a way of being in this world. And the two pieces of Hinduism that most profoundly shape me are, one, that it is my honor and duty to leave this world a better place than into which I came. And to attempt that. I don't know that I can do that or not, but that is my purpose. And the second piece of it, and I didn't mention this at the first service, but I'll mention it now. The guiding philosophy of Hinduism that shapes my work is the concept of nishkam karma. And nishkam karma is the belief that we act without expectation. I don't do this work because I expect anyone to change their minds or become different people or to learn anything. I do this work because I have a moral obligation to do it. And that's all that's my business. And that is to just be here, speak truth to power, and know that I have fulfilled my obligation.
Thank you very much. You know, in Unity, we say we are a movement, not a religion. Mm-hmm. Sound familiar?
It does.
And I told Archana at the first service that Charles Fillmore was a great student of Hinduism. Mm-hmm. And when he put together Unity over the years, he really combined the two faiths together, taking some parts of other faiths also. But certainly Hinduism was a major factor in the formation of his understanding and his description of Christianity, and how we see Jesus, how we see Buddha, how we see the Hindu faith, and how we experience that in our day-to-day lives. And it's through a movement. It's through having a faith that is what you are and who you are that creates that opportunity to really grow and change and to become all you can become, to in essence be unlimited with your ability to think and to create and to be. And so, Archana, I want to thank you for being here, and I really look forward to this afternoon's workshop. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.